Good afternoon. I'm Danielle Conway, and you are watching Life in the Law on the Think Tech Talk series. My guest today is Professor Emerita Fran Miller. She originally started her career at Boston University Law School, but we in Hawaii have been fortunate to welcome her for 8 spring semesters at the William S. Richardson School of Law. And she's going to talk to us today about some things you really want to know about healthcare, but were too afraid to ask. Welcome, Fran.
Hi, Danielle. How are you?
I'm doing really well, and I'm glad we're having this talk today because healthcare is a maze. Before we approach that maze, I want our viewers to know a little bit about you and where you've come from to get to this point today of talking about this complex healthcare law. So how did you start your career, Fran, and how did you eventually wind up as interested in healthcare law as you have been?
Okay, well, I graduated from college many years ago, more than I'm going to tell you it was. And I went to work in Washington right away as an economist.
Oh.
And I was working at the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and they had me drafting constitutions and bylaws for the Alaskan Native tribes. And I had no idea what a constitution was or a bylaw or anything. And they said, oh, take one off the shelf. So I did that, and please God, none of them are still operating under the same documents I drafted. But I had no idea why they were any good or bad. I had no idea what I was doing, and I said, maybe I better find out. So I started law school back in 1962.
Amazing.
And there were only 3 women in my class.
Yes.
And by the time I graduated, they were saying, as they said to Sandy Day O'Connor, well, you can type in a law firm, but you can't work in a law firm.
Amazing.
So I was very fortunate. And
so it sounds like we have a topic for another show.
well, that would be true.
But let me ask you one question about that then. When you were coming through law school as only one of 3, were you steered into any particular disciplines?
I wasn't steered anywhere.
At all.
I didn't exist.
Really?
Actually, I did exist. Everyone knew who I was because I was one of them. But no, there was no mentoring, there was no nothing. However, I was married to a physician.
Okay.
And I had always been interested in healthcare, and I learned early on that healthcare is really about money. And that if there isn't money, nothing's really going to happen in healthcare.
So healthcare is about money. Money begets politics.
Oh, yes.
So the two you have had at least some initial exposure to by working in Washington, D.C.
Oh, yes. and I ended up being very lucky in another way. One of my colleagues was hiring people to do what I call the equivalent. I shouldn't say this. Never mind. Strike that.
Oh, darn. It was just about to get good.
Anyway, he hired me to teach legal research and writing.
Okay.
At my own law school, and otherwise the camel never would have gotten her nose under the tent.
Really? So you had to find a way in order to begin to exploit your knowledge base in healthcare law.
Right.
Well, welcome to a very complex area. I'm sure you thought when you started researching it. What did you find out then? How has that helped you now? How was healthcare law then, and how is it now?
Well, healthcare law, when I started teaching it as a substantive course, which I did in 1971, you can do the math on how many years ago that was. But when I started teaching, it was all about doctors in the courtroom and medical malpractice, or that's what everyone thought. So I had to develop my own teaching materials about that. It was really about Medicare and Medicaid, which had just come online in 1965, and they were changing the whole landscape of healthcare because suddenly there was money available to pay for care for everybody. I shouldn't say everybody, but at least the poor and the old people.
Right.
So I developed my own materials and started seeing how things really happen, how different things get paid for example, end-stage renal disease, when people need kidney transplants or dialysis. That happens to be the only disease-specific thing that is covered under Medicare, no matter how old you are.
So since you're mentioning these terms of art, tell us the difference between Medicare and Medicaid.
Well, I teach my students that you care for old people.
Okay, that's a good way to remember it.
Of which I am now one. And so Medicare is for the over 65 age population, and that takes, it's federal health insurance for the over 65 population. and permanently and totally disabled, some small categories.
Okay.
Medicaid, by way of contrast, is for people who are unable to pay for their health care because they're either in low paid jobs, unemployed, sick, whatever, and not to put too fine a point on, for poor people.
Right. And I don't want to put you on the spot in case you don't know specifically how healthcare works in other countries, but would you say that in places with universal care, that they are doing similar things that Medicare is doing for our population, but just for a broader range of constituents?
Well, what I do know a lot about it because I've
great.
I've gone to many different countries to cover their system, to look at their system, particularly the UK. But I tell my students the way to think about it, and this is wrong for a camera, but on the right we have the US. We have private health insurance taking place in private hospitals with private physicians, more or less. On the left, we have the UK with public insurance, public hospitals, and doctors, at least the specialists, are public employees. And all the rest of the countries are ranged on the spectrum around that.
I see. And so we are at the opposite end of the spectrum.
Absolutely.
And that brings to the point you were making about healthcare is about money.
Yes.
And then the point I made, and money begets politics.
Absolutely.
So in our system, if you are able to pay for your own private insurance, you're guaranteed fairly decent health care.
Yeah. Under most private health insurance policies, and depending on the details, but basically you're guaranteed, quote, medically necessary care, which, at least in the old days, and still to a very great degree, means whatever your doctor says you need.
Okay.
So medical necessity, they basically defer to the medical profession to tell them what it is. Insurers basically defer to the medical profession to tell them what it is. But increasingly, we're starting to encroach on that.
Okay. So we've talked about the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. What are some of the pockets of non-coverage that we should be aware of? Whether we're covered by private insurance or not, what things are we?
All right, well, one of the things that no payor, public or private, wants to pay for is something that is deemed experimental. Now, next question, well, what does it mean to be experimental? Answer, has not shown to be therapeutically effective.
But that's by our own Food and Drug Administration or our own government decision making.
Or the profession, if we're talking about a procedure.
Okay.
A procedure is experimental if they haven't yet done trials side by side, those who have it, those who don't have it, who does better.
So that's why you hear a lot of people actually doing things like medical traveling to other countries.
Well, they do that because it's cheaper.
Oh, okay.
A lot of times medical tourism is promoted by the country involved. For instance, one of our colleagues went to India to get a hip implant,
double hip replacement.
Double hip replacement, and got a vacation in an Indian resort. Well, she had at a much cheaper price and actually a more innovative procedure.
And excellent care,
yes,
I understand.
In India. But some people do that. Some people travel because something is not available here and something that is a little less ethically easy to deal with. Some people who are ineligible, for example, organ transplants here, will go to other countries where they can get them, and there's a little cloud over where those organs actually came from.
So the government is playing a role in protecting U.S. citizens by saying there are just some procedures that we are not yet able to approve.
And you particularly see this with oncology cases and people who have terminal cancer diagnoses, and someone is touting, a breakthrough therapy that's coming through the pipeline, and they don't want to go on a clinical trial because they're afraid they'll be in the placebo arm.
I see.
Or the standard of care. They want the new thing.
Right.
And what they don't realize is that the odds of that new thing really being the breakthrough therapy are really vanishingly small.
Okay, I see. All right, let me start asking you about this, the thing that's been on the horizon, the thing that's been in our faces for the last, what?
Much too.
Much too long. It's been pejoratively termed Obamacare, but we call it the Affordable Care Act. What's the politics behind the Affordable Care Act, and why has it taken on a life of its own?
Oh, that's such a complicated question. And if we take the president himself out of it, who for some reason that is way beyond me just infuriates and inflames some people, put that out of it, then the real underlying objection from people who are of a more libertarian bent is that it makes everybody, the individual mandate forces everybody in the country who can afford it to get health insurance. Now, the sort of irony under it is that most people in the United States already have health insurance. And that the number of people who would not be eligible for Medicaid, i.e. the expanded version of Medicaid that's in the Affordable Care Act, the number of people who are not eligible for that but put into these exchanges where they have to buy health insurance or they will have to pay a tax penalty is really quite small. But it's the principle that the government is, quote, making you buy something that you wouldn't otherwise buy that sticks in the craw of an awful lot of people.
So is the politics that if we do Affordable Care Act requirements for healthcare in this instance, we can use the template to then require citizens to do something in a whole different arena?
Well, that's the rhetoric. But I think the reality is that healthcare is sui generis. It's a unique area. Every other country in the world basically considers healthcare a right, a basic right of citizenship, the same way public education is a basic right of citizenship. It's no big deal everywhere else. But it, for historic reasons and the fact that we're a very individualistic society as opposed to a more hierarchical society, we don't like to be told what to do.
And so can you reiterate, just for my edification, what are some of those historical reasons why we take this approach? While Australia, Canada, and the UK have universal health care, why are we fighting the wave, the system?
Well, I think part of the reason is that we got, as a historical accident after the Depression and as the World War II started, we got health insurance sort of as a benefit of employment. It didn't used to be.
Okay.
It used to be you were one-on-one buying health insurance maybe, or just paying out of pocket.
Okay.
And then came the Depression, and people couldn't afford it, and hospitals were about to go bankrupt.
I see.
And so they formed the Blue Cross Association to basically bring money into their coffers so they wouldn't go under.
Okay.
And the idea caught on, and suddenly this got picked up as an employment benefit because it has this wonderful tax status. It's not considered income to an employee, and it's deductible from an employer as a business expense from an employer. So it's win-win as a tax wash for both of them.
Right.
So suddenly this became the favored way of compensating people by giving them health insurance.
I may not give you a very grand salary, but you can be confident that you will have health care.
Right. Health insurance.
Health insurance, that's right.
Health insurance and health care
are two different things. Exactly.
Let me just add one other thing.
Sure.
So by this sort of historical accident of the way people started getting health insurance as an employment benefit, pretty soon most everybody had it.
Right.
Except for old people and poor people. And then Lyndon Johnson, with his great society proposals, came in and said, we're going to expand it and give it to old people and poor people. And pretty soon, 84% of the people in the country have coverage.
And that's not a bad thing. All right, let's take a break. We're going to come back with Professor Emerita Fran Miller. We're talking about things you need to know or should know about healthcare, but we're too afraid to ask. You're watching Life in the Law on the Think Tech Talk series.
I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day, host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the Think Tech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong Jiang.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Welcome back. My name is Danielle Conway, and you are watching Life in the Law on the Think Tech Talk series. My guest today is Professor Emerita Fran Miller, and we're talking healthcare. So, Fran,
Yes.
great information in that first segment. But for the layperson, the common person like me, who knows next to nothing about healthcare, how do I keep up with what's going on with healthcare and health insurance?
Okay, this is a drum I beat all the time with my students, but there is no substitute for reading a classy newspaper every day.
Dependable.
By which I mean New York Times, Wall Street Journal, something like that, or a local newspaper that takes their feeds. They cover the waterfront in a tremendous way, and they also, if you can get them online, you can get them. So figured so you get their lead stories on healthcare every day, and it comes at you. Just the ordinary person can get that very, very easily.
But we were talking before we got here, and there's things that pop up in the news every single day about healthcare and health insurance, right? How do we keep track of all of this? Today's headline: obesity rates down.
And obesity rates for little children.
For little children are down. Okay, I understand that. I can consume that and figure out what that means for my child. But how do I understand how it all fits together?
Well, one of the best places to go, if you really want to understand, for example, the Affordable Care Act.
Yes.
The Kaiser Family Foundation website has a terrific, it's like a cheat sheet from soup to nuts about what's in it in a way that's very understandable for a layperson. And I tell my students to do it. I said, take a look at that Kaiser Foundation. It's a summary of the Affordable Care Act.
Okay.
And then if you want to drill down on any one of the sections, then you can go to the statutes and work with it through there. But their website is terrific to give you the overview about what it's about, and it has wonderful monographs on all the different sections.
So you keep mentioning your students, and so you're telling your students to actually go and seek out this information. Will that website also speak to someone like me?
Absolutely. If you have, it has a terrific search engine right on it, and if you have a particular problem that you want to look at in the Affordable Care Act, or pretty much anything else in health policy and health law, just stick it on the website and it will give you very valuable resources.
Okay.
But let me just say one more thing about what I try to do for my students. I tell them I want them to be tiger lawyers. I want them to understand the basic floor that we're dealing with in healthcare, so that they can then take something like this morning's headline in the New York Times, that the obesity rate among 2 to 5-year-olds has gone down 44% in a decade. That is astonishing. That doesn't happen anywhere else. There's no other area of healthcare where something like that is happening.
So what does that mean when you read that, knowing the baseline?
What does it mean?
What does that
when
mean?
I read that, I'll tell you what it means. It means, number one, Michelle's Obama's thing to get out and get moving program is reaching the parents, because it's not reaching the kids, it's reaching their parents. It's making them understand. The second thing it means is that our healthcare costs eventually, if these kids stick with it, are going to go down. They're not going to get get the diabetes. They're not going to get the heart problems. They're not, because they're taking care of themselves from the get-go.
Okay.
Now that means their parents are controlling both what they're doing and what they're eating. Big time, what they're eating. So I see that and I said, ooh, our total health care costs are just also going to start to mirror that shortly.
So when you saw that this morning, you had a smile on your face. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And most particularly because I have triplet grandchildren who are 8 months old, and I said, okay, kids,
Exactly.
you get the message.
Exactly. That's fantastic. Thanks for alerting me to that.
Okay.
So the other thing that I want to ask you then in relation to that, you mentioned Michelle Obama and the Get Out and Get Moving, her platform project. Why has this Affordable Care Act been so politicized if, as you mentioned, this extraordinary reduction in obesity for children has such fantastic efforts for us as we move forward? Why is this so politicized?
I think one of the reasons it's so politicized was the way it got passed. And if you can think back to 2010, I guess, when it was being passed, we were just starting to get into this acidic, horrendous, stalemate business in Congress between the Republicans and the Democrats. And what we have for the statute is in fact the Senate bill. And the House passed a version of the Senate bill, but didn't really pass its own. And then suddenly it became clear that people were going to oppose it just because it was the president's program.
I see.
And Nancy Pelosi pushed through a vote, and I believe the margin to push it through was something like 8 votes, like 210 to 218, something like that. And so she pushed it through, so people felt that it had been crammed down people's throats. And there never was a conference committee to iron out differences between them. So what you got was just the plain original bill, which was full of ticks and things
That should have been worked out in conference.
And now we have all the mess we have now about the...
So if I were to summarize what you just said, and please correct me if I'm summarizing it improperly, the House didn't keep up.
Right.
Okay.
That's what I articulated just like that. They didn't keep up. They didn't do its job, and now all the things that you were seeing the president's having to issue executive orders for, and we giving delays here, and everybody goes, "See, it's a bad bill." But we all knew that from the beginning.
Yeah.
It didn't get the usual care and attention.
But had you kept up, had you stayed the course and did what you had to do, House, in response to it,
it would have been better.
It would have been much better. And there wouldn't have been this necessarily too close vote that would send this message that this is crammed down people's throats.
Yeah, and that fits in with a libertarian
Exactly. That feeds
dislike of it.
I see. That feeds right into it. Okay. So thanks for explaining that. But let's bring this now to something local.
Yes.
So we understand at least a little bit about the federal side of this. What does all of this mean for the exchange here in Hawaii? How have we been impacted in Hawaii?
Well, the problem with the exchange in Hawaii is, number one, you're dealing with small numbers.
Okay.
You only have a few thousand people who need the exchange. Let's just talk about what the exchange is.
Yeah, why don't you tell me what it is?
Let me back up one more
Okay.
thing. What did the Affordable Care Act really want to do? What was the point?
Yeah.
It was to bring 33 million people who are uninsured. When I told you we were sort of 84% covered between Medicare, Medicaid, and private health insurance, now bring 13% more into the ranks of the insured. There were 2 ways to do it.
Yes.
Number 1, expand Medicaid.
Okay.
Expand the eligibility criteria for Medicaid so we could get more
So
poor
we could have
people
done
in.
that.
And number 2, set up these health insurance exchanges which enable people who otherwise couldn't afford health insurance because it was way too expensive to buy it. And there's a sliding scale for income. You can get a government subsidy to help pay the premium
Okay.
if you fit within that. So 2 ways to expand access. Sort of 14, 15 million people coming in by expanded Medicaid, and another 15 or 16 million coming in through the exchanges by being able to buy lower cost insurance.
And that covers that remaining 13% that were out there
It still
with
leaves some
no
people to-
coverage.
Right.
Okay.
But then the Supreme Court, hands us a
Snafu,
surprise.
right?
And the surprise was, well, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
The individual mandate, the thing that people hated the most, of the people who
Right,
hated it
right.
the most, the individual mandate survived.
Yes.
But it survived as a tax, and by Justice
Mm-hmm.
Roberts calling it a tax rather than expansion of the Commerce Clause.
Okay.
But with respect to Medicaid, it had provisions in it that basically would penalize states that didn't accept the expanded Medicaid thing. And it said that's illegal, unconstitutional coercion, so states don't have to
do
take
it.
expand Medicaid.
Right.
So what you've got is some the majority, I think, of the states are expanding Medicaid and doing what it was supposed to do. But the dig-in, die-hard states like Texas
I see.
are saying, Texas, which has the highest percentage of uninsured in the country, 25%,
Said they're not going to expand.
said they're
it.
not going to expand Medicaid. So in Texas, poor people are really up a creek if there's any water in it.
Mhm, without a paddle. Right.
And they're up a creek.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas Hawaii says, fine, we'll take the expanded.
That's right.
Because it's 110% paid for by the feds this year. And was sliding back to 90% paid for by 2020.
By the feds in 2020.
Yeah, by
Okay.
2020.
Okay. So in Hawaii, we have been proactive and progressive
Yes,
by.
but you always have.
And tell us about that, because I remember you actually gave a talk at the law school, and you made us feel really good about ourselves.
Well, you should. You were the first state in the country to have, quote, it's not universal coverage,
Right.
but the employer mandate, you made it a requirement that employers provide health insurance to employees with certain exceptions, which everyone in this state knows.
Right.
But you had the highest number of insurers in the whole country
And we should
for
be proud
years
of
and
that.
years
yeah.
and years and years.
Okay.
So
So
Massachusetts
beat us out.
beat you.
I remember you told us that during the talk as well, and we were really upset with you.
But we instead of having an employment mandate, had an individual mandate,
I see.
and that's what was adopted
So the
for the Obama
I see.
reforms.
So that individual mandate is actually the template that Obama used for the Affordable Care Act.
And let's just not be very clear about the fact that Mitt Romney signed that legislation and touted it as his biggest accomplishment when he was there.
Exactly, but when he ran for president,
He ran away from
he
it.
ran away from it. Interesting. Again, healthcare, money, politics.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The trilogy continues. So before we go to break, what does Hawaii's exchange look like now? As you said, employers are required to carry health insurance for their employees.
But they always were.
Okay.
But the Affordable Care Act adds some pieces to it that means more of them will have to.
Okay.
But the problem that Hawaii ran into was they chose to make their exchange a private not-for-profit organization instead of a part of state government. So there has not been the transparency about what's been going on, and there was quite the headline in
Read it to us.
the headline is in Investors Business Daily saying Obamacare taxpayers spend $56,819 to sign up each person in Hawaii on its exchange.
And that's a transparency question.
And so everybody's going, what?
What is that?
And I know you're
Yes.
going to break, but I want to, if you're going to break before I finish saying this.
You say it.
Okay, what I want to be sure you understand is you have only a small number of people who need to be signed up. So obviously the unit cost, the per person
gonna be
cost of
higher.
building your exchange is going to be higher. This number will come down as
People
more
sign up.
But you were way late
Yes.
getting it off ground
Yes.
because of
Well,
your
because
IT person.
Yeah, and
Your
let's
IT
not just
company.
blame it on the IT person. I come at this from a very different perspective. My area is procurement. And so in the acquisition planning, it's not just the IT person, it's the whole
process
and the acquisition core around it to get the right people at the table to do the type of pre-planning necessary to work this out. So I wouldn't put it all with the IT
No,
person.
you're right about that.
Okay, you're watching Life in the Law. My name is Danielle Conway. My guest is Professor Emerita Fran Miller, and we're talking about some things you want to know about healthcare, but we're too afraid to ask.
Castle and Cooke, Hawaii. Investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state. Collateral Analytics, empowering the real estate industry to make better informed property investment decisions. The Foreign Trade Zone, bringing the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone programs to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. Galen Ho, a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company. Hawaiian Electric Company, and its affiliates Maui Electric and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island. The Hawaii Energy Policy Forum, incorporating diverse perspectives to design a flexible and forward-looking energy strategy. Hawaii Energy, the state's energy and efficiency program created to help Hawaii's residents and businesses adopt a clean energy lifestyle. Hawaii Gas, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future. Hawaii Pacific Health, bringing technology and teamwork together to transform healthcare in Hawaii. The High Tech Development Corporation, attached to DBED, is the state's leading technology agency. The SHIDLER Family Foundation, supporting educational, cultural, and charitable organizations, including think tank.
Welcome back. I'm Danielle Conway. You are watching Life in the Law on the Think Tech Talk series. My guest today is Professor Emerita Fran Miller, and we are talking about the healthcare law, things that you might want to know, but we're too afraid to ask. We're going to come back to a topic we were talking about in the last segment. We're talking about some headline news today in Hawaii, particularly the Star Advertiser. So what's the headline you want to talk about, Fran?
Well, for anyone who's really interested in the nuts and bolts of what's going on with Hawaii's connector, I recommend you read a op-ed piece by Jerry Silva, who's the state AARP director. And he has a very good one about what we should be doing. There are two bills in the legislature now about what to do about this connector and the mess it has been.
And so what are the two things that he's suggesting that we do about the Hawaii Health Connector?
Well, the main thing he's saying is you've got to have a sustainability plan. You've got to show, because it was this private foundation, not-for-profit foundation, we don't know anything about the contract negotiations. We don't know anything about what actually went wrong. It's not subject, their meetings aren't subject to the open meeting law.
Right. We don't know what they've established as priorities.
Nope.
We don't know what objectives or goals that they've established.
And he says they need to come forward with a sustainability plan, including financial sustainability. How are they going to keep this thing going? We can't, go the black box route again.
Exactly.
Where you don't know what's going on.
And so what's the second thing that he suggests besides
It's
the sustainability
mainly
plan?
fiscal responsibility. How are you going to keep it going? Are you going to tax
Okay.
all health insurance plans to come up with the money to run the exchange? This is a very expensive apparatus to run for not that many people.
That's right. And that's what you mentioned from the last segment. Even though our numbers are high now, it's because of our population.
Because it's only a
It's
small
a
base.
small
And there
number.
may be other ways to do it. Maybe you could piggyback on other states' contracting processes or something like that, or piggyback on a federal. And you still got to
Yes. Yeah.
individualize it for the insurers who are willing to do business in the state. But if I may add one more
You
piece
may
here,
add one more piece.
you have an amazingly small number of health insurers in the state.
Right.
And I understand there are historical reasons for it and there are geographic reasons for it.
That's right.
But you don't have a lot of competition for the health insurance dollar here.
Yeah.
But I might add, you have very low overall healthcare costs. So, there are a lot of
do.
good things to say.
We do, and we have very good health care as
Yes,
well.
you do.
We have excellent health care, and I know that there's some gaps, but essentially, we're doing very well in Hawaii.
Yes, you are.
I think the point that you raise about the op-ed today, the piece by Jerry Silva, is excellent, because the problem with the Health Connector is not getting the right people at the table under the guise of state processes to make sure that this is done in a competitive and a fair and equitable way, such that taxpayer dollars are maximized. And that's the concern.
I was going to say that's the hope.
That is the hope, and that's the concern on the fiscal side. Do you mind if I change gears now? Because
Your show, Danielle. Do what you want.
not only are you an expert with the Affordable Care Act, but you also have some insights into food and drug law, which impact us in Hawaii, particularly around issues related to genetically modified foods, also clinical trials. There are numbers of researchers here and testing, and what should people be looking out for to protect their own interests with these various topics that we've mentioned. So let's start with the clinical trials. What should we know as a population?
What should you know as a population?
Yeah.
Let me just back up a minute.
Okay.
Why do we have clinical trials? And the reason we have is to try to find out whether something works.
Okay.
And we talked a little earlier about people, chasing something, the latest breakthrough, and they want the breakthrough. They don't want to wait for the clinical trial to tell them at the end of 5 years whether
Right.
something does or doesn't work. So people, particularly people with terminal diagnoses, are often grasping at whatever might be out there. And on the one hand, fine, it's good for them that clinical trials of new medications are going on so that they can, participate in the science of the future and maybe find something that would be good for them.
Right.
But on the other hand, they are a particularly vulnerable population, and it's easy to get them to think, when you tell people that if they go into a clinical trial, their odds of actually being helped by the drug are quite low, they'll hear, there are odds that I might be helped.
Right.
You can tell them
Right.
it's 95.5, or you can tell them it's 5/95, and whichever they weigh, they'll focus on the way the number makes them feel good.
Yeah, so no matter how much informed consent you might provide to people, they may not necessarily.
And I'm going to pick you up on that one, because I don't
Okay.
allow my students to say
Good,
how much
okay.
informed consent.
Cindy.
I said, you might get their consent. The question of whether it's an informed
Informed
consent is
a
always
very
a fact
different
question.
thing. And is that then, now that we understand a little bit about clinical trials from your description, is that a big issue?
Well, can I back up one more thing?
Sure.
Clinical trials, there are four kinds, and basically four kinds.
Okay.
A phase 1 trial is at the very beginning, after they've done the bench science and done the animal studies, and they think this thing might work, they go to the FDA and say, can we try this on humans?
Okay.
And then you have to go to institutional review boards who review it, so forth and so on. And then if they say yes, okay. Phase 1 trial is a small trial, and it's done only to find the maximum safe dose. So they will give you 2 units. They give me 4, they give the next person 8, the next person 16, and they keep upping the dose until they
Just
find
to
a
find safe dose.
to find, wait a minute, side effects are
Yes.
starting to really kick in
Yeah.
here. We know. So a phase 1 trial usually has maybe 20 people, and you put somebody in a phase 1 trial with a terminal diagnosis, they think they're going to get something that might help them. They don't know that nothing has yet been done. I mean, they know, they're told
Right.
on evidence. Then if you find the maximum safe dose, and you do pick up some evidence maybe about efficacy, then you go to a phase 2 trial. That has maybe 80 people in it. And that's to collect efficacy data.
Right.
So they found their maximum safe dose in a phase 1 trial. Now we go to phase 2. Okay, let's see what it looks like in terms of maybe it works.
Okay.
Then when we finish that, if we see some efficacy, then we go to the massive 3,000 to
Big
4,000
trial.
people
Yes.
for phase 3. And that's the one where you know, they got some evidence that it really might work, and we think it's not so toxic that people are dropping like flies.
Right.
You're in that. The end of that, they've got data on safety and efficacy. They take it to the FDA.
Right.
FDA will probably require 2 of these trials, you know, but the FDA then decides whether they are going to give it a license to market in interstate commerce or not.
And you've just explained through a description of all these phases why it might take 5 years.
Oh, because you need to know
Right.
longevity.
Exactly.
But anyway, what I was going to say, if somebody said, should I be in a clinical trial? First question, is it a phase 1 trial?
What kind of trial are we in? Where are we?
Phase 1, I say, I don't think so.
I don't think so. Well, let's take a break. I'm Danielle Conway. This is Life in the Law. On the Think Tech Talk series, we're talking with Fran Miller about healthcare and things you should know and questions you should ask.
Aloha, I'm Nicole Horry for Think Tech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Horry. Mahalo.
Welcome back. I'm Danielle Conway, and you are watching Life in the Law on the Think Tech Talk series. I'm here with Professor Emerita Fran Miller from Boston University School of Law. We're having a riveting discussion about clinical trials, and you just explained to me the importance of knowing at what phase you are in the trials. You wanted to say a couple more things.
I want to say one more thing. Should I go on a trial? Question mark. Answer, how sick are you? What's your risk averseness? So forth and so on. But you should know one very important fact, and that is for every 5 drugs that actually go into a clinical trial, only 1 will ever get a license to be marketed. So 4 out of 5 will turn out either to be too toxic or non-efficacious and never get a license. So when you hear all these wonderful breakthrough stories being presented, or things being presented at medical meetings, and they say early trials are showing,
Right.
early trials probably mean phase 1 or phase 2. We need to try it with an awful lot of people. And then there's one more thing.
Yes.
There is such a thing as a phase 4 trial. After you've got your license, they may run a phase 4 trial. They may, the FDA, if it's a fast-track drug, which didn't have to go through quite all the hoops on there, the FDA may require you to do a phase 4, i.e. keep collecting evidence after it's out there.
Right.
So, or if you want to approve it for a broader range of indications, you might be in a phase 4 trial. That's the safest place to be.
So let me stick my neck out with this next question, because I want to link it back to the medical tourism we were talking about.
Yeah.
So is it that many people get frustrated with this process of U.S. clinical trials, and that's why they go often to other countries where there may be some
people will say this drug has been approved in Europe, for example, or Israel or wherever, and they say, if I can't get it here now, I'm going to go there and get it.
Right.
But what they should understand is the European Medicines Agency has a process where they approve first and
investigate later.
They are big on phase 4 trials and very light on phase 1, 2, 3. I mean, that's the analogy.
I get it.
So, there's a reason why now you can only look back at the thalidomide disaster. All those babies who were born with deformed limbs were born in Europe. They weren't born here because we hadn't approved it. So we're the gold standard of careful approval.
Interesting. So thank you for clearing that up. Let's move on to the next topic and tell us a little bit about. Is that your phone, Fran? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Come on back. So tell us what the FDA does regulate. So it's not just drugs. What else do they regulate?
FDA regulates 1/4 of all products of all products in the U.S. economy. It's
Yes.
huge.
Okay. all right.
And the big piece, of course, is food.
Food. Now, the other one that I'm most interested in is dietary supplements.
Yes.
Do they regulate that as well?
Every time I think about a dietary supplement, I think about, talk about money raining from heaven. Just what you should know. We just
Okay.
talked about clinical trials about
Yes.
proving safety and efficacy before you go to market. Dietary supplements do neither.
Oh,
You are
wow.
buying a pig in a poke.
Wow.
Now,
Wow.
if you're buying, Centrum vitamins, we've had enough experience with them, but that's not really a pig in a poke. But for most things that are on the shelves of, hello Whole Foods, hello GNC, for most things that are in their thing on
Yeah, they have
dietary
a
supplements,
special section.
and we have special legislation just for them. If I can
Okay.
tell you the hierarchy of what the Food and Drug Administration regulates, it's drugs. They get the tightest regulation,
Okay.
and that includes generics and OTCs,
Okay.
over the counters.
counters.
Drugs,
Mm-hmm.
devices. Devices are not quite as rigorous as drugs, but that. And then we move down to drugs, devices, dietary supplements, and food.
Okay.
How do we regulate food? We assume that food is, in FDA parlance, GRAS, generally recognized as safe.
Wow.
So you come to market first with
Right,
food,
right.
and only after the
You
fact
wait
do we
for a
take
problem.
it off.
Exactly.
But dietary supplements make all these claims
Yes,
about health.
yes.
And they used to make, you should go look at some of the old snake oil claims, the advertisements, they're hilarious.
Well, I stay up late at night. I see the advertisements.
No, I mean the old style ones.
The old ones are even worse.
Oh yeah, they used to give cocaine to nursing mothers because it calmed the baby down.
Of course.
Not to mention the mother.
Exactly.
But the dietary supplements, we're making outrageous claims. So the FDA started coming after them. They said, you're holding them out and as diagnosing, treating, da-da-da-da-da-da. That makes you a drug. You have to go through safety and efficacy studies and
Okay.
prove to us that you are.
Got it.
And Senator Hatch from Utah, home of many, many dietary supplement companies, was very instrumental in getting an important piece of legislation passed in 1992, which said, back off, FDA, don't touch dietary supplements.
Amazing.
So they are basically, if you really want to think about it, they're basically unregulated. Unregulated.
Oh, my
Well,
goodness.
unregulable
Yeah.
thanks to Dietary Supplement Act.
Yeah.
Before the fact. After the fact, they can go after them. If someone gets hurt, they can go after them. And as we've seen, those, weight
Yes.
loss stuff and the muscle building stuff.
So I should just keep running, is what you're saying. Just
You
keep
bet.
running.
And let me tell you something about weight loss products. Weight loss products are one of three things. They're either speed.
Okay.
That's what they're doing. They're
That's
messing
it.
with your metabolism.
Okay.
They're either speed or they're diuretics, which will make you,
Yes. Yes.
okay, or they're starch or fat blockers. And the term fecal incontinence is not one you want
To be acquainted
encounter
with.
too soon. So there ain't no magic bullet.
Just keep-
And that's why when you stop taking them, you gain the weight right back.
I see. So I'll just keep running.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's round out the show. We have 2 minutes left, and
Oh,
I'm
sorry about
sorry
that.
to save 2 minutes for GMO, but let's talk a little bit about genetically modified food.
All right, I will say two things about it, particularly because I know a lot of people here are very concerned about
Yes.
it. I'm all for transparency and label if you want to. However, FDA has done in-depth studies about this. There is no evidence, at least of harm to the human food chain. Right now from that now, and the Europeans feel differently.
Okay.
But I'm not opposed to labeling. I know it will add a cost to manufacture, but the FDA's got the problem in hand.
Okay.
But what people want here is labeling, and
Right.
if people choose not to take it, anything like that, well, I think they're entitled.
Well, I thank you for that. And I know 2 minutes was not enough time, so I hope that anyone viewing would understand that that was just a cursory look at the GMO issue and not a full in-depth look. But I want to thank you for being here. This has been a fabulous discussion with Professor Emerita Fran Miller from Boston University Law School. She teaches at the William S. Richardson School of Law in our spring semesters, and so we thank her for the contribution that she's making to our state and to our law school. You're watching Life in the Law with Danielle Conway on the Think Tech Talk series.